Well, good morning, Andrea. Nice to have you in my office here. Cheers.
Thanks for the coffee.
Yeah, of course. Our first official recorded coffee chat. We've had lots of coffee chats together, but this is the first one we're doing on video, so that's pretty exciting. So I wanted to learn more. I know that you've embarked on a new chapter in your mortgage brokering career here, and very exciting. And you're with Dominion Lending now, is it?
I am with Dominion Lending,
Yeah.
so big changes,
Yeah.
but definitely exciting changes. As you know, used to work for one of the big five as a mortgage specialist, and decided to make the move to mortgage agent under Dominion Lending.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice because it allows me to work for the client, right? So I'm not working for the bank at this point.
Yeah.
So really kind of digging in and helping clients with their needs. And there's just so many different options.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Good for you. And I can't wait to hear your take on what's going on. There's so much to talk about right now. So love to hear your thoughts on the current economic climate. What's on your mind these days?
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, I could bounce the question back to you afterwards as well,
Yeah,
but
please do.
there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
So it's definitely an interesting market.
Mm-hmm.
From an interest rate perspective, we have seen some drops from the Bank of Canada on the prime side there,
Mm-hmm.
the variable side. We've seen fixed rates sort of come down a little bit and then bounce back up. So they're doing a little bit of a teeter-totter. And on my end, I am noticing a little bit of a slower market in terms of purchasing and buying, but lots of refinances happening right now, understandably. How are you finding things?
Well, yeah, no, I agree. I'm seeing, the volumes overall have been down, but people that need to move, that have life changes happening, are still moving. So, I'm having some good success this year in terms of helping those clients that truly need to move. Whether it's I've helped a number of young families that need to upsize, they got children on the way and things like that. I've helped a number of senior couples sell their family homes and downsize into condo apartments and retirement communities, and I've got a few luxury buyers that have done actually really well in their careers and looking to make upgrades. So this year's it's an interesting year. It's definitely a buyer's market from my perspective, and in general, I think if you look at the stats, the sales versus new listings are in that 30. Sometimes touching 40%, but mostly in the 30s, which is strong buyer's market territory.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that impact you? I know, we've done a lot of deals together in terms of, when you're helping a buyer to get prepared, to start looking at properties, what sort of things are you telling them? What sort of things are you doing to help them right now?
Yeah, so I could go on forever, but just to keep things sort of short and simple, there are a lot of, first-time home buyers waiting on the sidelines right now and have been waiting on the sidelines for the last, I would say, up to a few years now, playing the interest rate game and waiting for rates to drop. As a first-time home buyer or as a buyer period, the recommendation is always to get a pre-approval done. So there's 3 steps in that regard. There's a pre-qualification, a pre-approval, and then you have your firm approval. Pre-qualification is kind of what I call napkin math. We're writing numbers down on a piece of paper and saying, ratio wise, this looks mediocre, this looks good, you fall within that. A pre-approval is highly recommended because we're actually pulling your credit. So we are getting, income documents, pulling your credit to look at the full financial picture. And actually submitting the application to a lender where an adjudicator and underwriter is looking at it and saying, okay, you fall within, these ratios. And not to confuse pre-approval with a firm approval. So pre-approval is giving you essentially a guideline of what you can purchase within ratio-wise. But it is always recommended to work closely with your realtor and your client, because if the client is looking at a specific property, send me the details so that we can input it and work those numbers specifically into the application. And then submitting for a firm approval upon purchase, right? So that's taking a look at your appraisal, making sure the property that you're buying is not undervalued or overvalued, more importantly. But so there's a lot of first-time buyers waiting on the sideline, and that's kind of what I'm seeing right now, and some advice behind it. So
yeah, so as you mentioned, there's a whole bunch of interest rate drops, which didn't impact the fixed rates quite as much, right? We've talked about that before. But I guess, so in terms of, you already have a pre-approval, then you're going looking at a place, and you're putting that offer in, right? I mean, I know you always advise to keep a finance condition in the offer still, even if you've got that pre-approval. But help us understand that, in terms, you mentioned the value. I mean, what can happen to, especially a first-time buyer, someone putting down the minimum kind of thing, what can happen, if a property doesn't come through if the bank doesn't think it's worth what you're paying for? What can happen?
So if you have that condition of financing, which again is always recommended, and let's say you purchase a property for $500,000. Not here, but somewhere within Ontario, maybe.
Somewhere in Thunder Bay.
Hypothetically, we'll say you purchase a property, you put an offer down for $500,000, and you put your condition of financing. That comes to your mortgage agent, and we order an appraisal. That appraisal, so someone is going out to appraise the property to see its worth by looking at comparables and the actual property itself in some cases. And what we don't want to see happen for clients is that appraisal coming in less than the purchase price. So what if that appraisal is only coming in saying the property that you want to buy is only worth $450,000?
Right. So what happens then?
Well, I mean, you have choices. So if you have your condition of financing, you can rescind your offer, get your deposit back.
Okay, so you've got the conditions that protects you.
That's correct. So very important there, and that's why we stress having that condition. Or if you do have cash on the sidelines or someone that can lend you the money, you're just paying the difference essentially. So you're putting, an extra $50,000 to make up that difference between the $450 and the $500.
Which could be impossible for some people to make up that difference, right?
It's very hard to get your feet in the market right now.
So that's really the risk, right? So I mean, I guess with it being a buyer's market, I mean, I'm able to put a finance condition in most of the time these days. It's that kind of market where we can typically, put in some condition on inspection and condition on finance. But there's still the occasional time right now where, a property is being intentionally underpriced. There's multiple offers happening. And in those cases, I mean, to win those kind of deals, often one of your best strategies is to have no conditions. And I know that this was happening, a ton for me, and I know for you as well through COVID, very stressful times in that sense. But in the case where you want to go in without any conditions, what advice would you give a buyer, who has to compete like this on something that's a hot commodity?
Yeah, that's a good one. The advice is always there. If you choose to go with no conditions, especially condition of financing, and you're revoking that, the risk is on the client, right? So that is a risk that you are willing to take. Knowing and putting trust in your realtor. So it is very important to have a good realtor that you're working with. The risk is on you. So I don't like to say to remove it, and I never would say that. But I mean, your pre-approval gives you and gives us a pretty good idea of what you can afford if you needed to make up that difference, for example. For sure. And what avenue, but every situation is personal, right? So.
Your pre-approvals are solid. I know that, and I can say from a real estate perspective, being in this business now for 11 years, I've competed in dozens of bidding wars. And if we're going to go into something, with no conditions, I mean, I make darn sure that we've gone through a very detailed analysis of what a property is worth. And even if we're bidding on something, I want to make sure that the client is getting it for a fair price. And if it's going to go way over what something's worth and the market's trending up and there's a risk there, I'll let the client know that, I wouldn't be going beyond X dollars on this. If we lose, we'll keep looking. Because, and I've been fortunate in our analysis that to never have a property not appraised. It's never happened. I don't expect it will, but I always advise the client that there's no point just going over ask by $200,000 or something to make sure we win. Going over ask because it was underpriced makes sense. Obviously, you shouldn't expect to buy a property for an underpriced value, but how far do we go really depends on what's it actually worth.
Well, that's why it's so important to work with a realtor on in that regard. I take care of numbers. My job is numbers. But when you're actually evaluating the property and looking at market trends property wise, that's why it's important to work with an experienced realtor.
Yeah, for sure. This is good. Awesome. Appreciate all the tips. Great chat.
Thanks for having me.
Let's do this again soon.
Your coffee's pretty good too.
Right on.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Well, that was terrific having Andrea on this morning. Always great to see her. Fantastic mortgage broker. What is happening in our local markets? And as I like to always say, what the Howell is going on? Let's take a look here. The RE/MAX Escarpment RE/MAX Niagara Appointment Center. This is the highest appointment volume for this week in the past 6 years. That is great news. The monthly pace for May and for June of 2025 so far, already 3,144 appointments in just the first week. If that trend holds, will likely be 11 to 13% higher than June of 2024. So this is a good sign. The demand is coming back. Things are flipping around in our market. There's so much going on in the world right now and so many confusing things economically that it's an uncertain time. But you know what? People need to move and they want to move, and real estate's going to continue no matter what. What is happening specifically in the Burlington area? Listings have gone up somewhat since last week. Number of sales in the past 30 days is down a little bit. We've got just over 4 months worth of supply, and we're seeing the sales versus new listings ratio at 36%. So it's still a buyer's market out there. Great deals to be had, and room for negotiation, room for some conditions. We're seeing most properties that are getting successfully sold. They're getting sold, in 3 to 4.5 weeks time frame, and there's still a fair bit of cancels and relists and properties like that. And so the average overall is taking about 48 days, so about a month and a half to get properties sold. We're seeing in most cases around 3% negotiating room, but again, that's a median average. We can't take that as literal, but 2 to 4% is pretty typical right now in this market. In the Hamilton area, we've got listings have increased somewhat since last week. Number of sales in the past 30 days is slightly higher than it was. About 4.5 months worth of supply in Hamilton, and it's a buyer's market condition in Hamilton as well. We're at 37% absorption, which means that about 37% of properties are getting sold in the first 30 days. Of those properties that are getting sold, we're seeing a median days on market of 22, an average of 38. So again, about 3 to 4.5 weeks. In terms of overall average, about 54 days on the market. And we're seeing typically about 2.5% negotiation room in the Hamilton area. In the Oakville market, we've got listings have gone up slightly week over week. Number of sales in the past 30 days, relatively consistent. About 3.5 months worth of supply in Oakville. And we're sitting just under 40% on the absorption. So it's a bit stronger market there. Still a buyer's market, but a little bit stronger than the other two areas. Median days on market is 17, average days on market 26. And we're seeing about just under 4% in Oakville as the median average for negotiations on those successful transactions. That's all I got for you today. If you have any questions, please reach out. Always love to hear from you.